Hello and welcome to episode 20 of CMTV. I'm Aubrey Going.
And I'm Alison Kavanagh.
So Ali, what are you going to be talking about today?
I'm going to be talking about the thyroid gland, the throat chakra and willpower.
Okay, very interesting. I'm going to be talking about anterior tibialis and looking really at muscle balance and what anterior tibialis does. Do you want to get started?
Yeah, definitely. We're on to our fifth chakra, the throat chakra. So it's located here at the base of the throat, nearly where the little hollow is. And it's the fifth energy center, as we said. It's denoted by the colour blue, kind of an aquamarine blue. Right. It's also represented by the element ether.
Okay.
Yeah. So we talked about fire for the heart center. We're moving on up into another expression of the energy through this energy center. So it affects areas like the neck and shoulders, the throat. So people prone to carrying a lot of neck and shoulder tension, recurring sore throats. It's involved with our expression and creativity. So that's largely what it represents, being able to speak our truth, to have clarity and to use our willpower in the correct way.
Okay. Ether is an interesting one. I mean, most people are going to be familiar with earth, water, fire. These are things that we all experience.
Yeah.
So ether is a little bit more ephemeral. It's energy.
Energy based, yeah.
Okay.
I suppose energy in motion we often think of for emotion, but it's involved with effort. So it's nearly bringing the effort into our day to day. So if this effort is done in a pressured, tense way, or we're making effort because of insecurity, it can put a lot of pressure onto this area. But people don't realize that we have a higher will, and that's our connection to our relaxed part of the mind, to the energetic self. And the law of life associated with this energy center says, not my will, but thine be done.
Okay, that's an interesting one because I think that sometimes is open to misinterpretation.
Yeah.
People think I shouldn't have any will, or they think that they're handing it over to somebody else,
Yes.
a community leader, a politician, a religious figure, a cult leader, or God knows what.
Yeah.
They think that they're giving up their will.
Yeah.
But presumably what is intended is that it is your higher self.
Yes.
That you're saying, not my. We could even look at this from a point of view of like the conscious mind and then our unconscious, that the conscious mind is the not your will because you have a limited perspective.
Yeah.
So it's your will is you're choosing your higher will.
Yes.
Your higher self and its goals, aspirations, desires, direction, whatever words you want to put on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's about stilling yourself. So I'm sounding very religious today, but be still and know that I am within. That there's a stillness or a quietening of the conscious mind, the effort mind, to allow the connection with the relaxed part of the mind and to be able to listen to what is right for me, what direction do I want to go in. And it's effortless then. That once you make that contact and you're aware that you're not working out of, I must try harder, I must do more, make more effort. And the problem with that is that you burn yourself out.
Yeah.
And you'll often see this even in how the physical gland, the thyroid, functions. Because the thyroid controls metabolism, the rate at which we burn our calories.
Yeah.
So if we're efforting all the time and push, the thyroid has to go faster and faster to give us more energy, to help us to push ourselves even more. But the problem with that is that it can burn out the thyroid.
Yeah.
So you'll see people wiry thin for years, very active, go. The little tell signs, like when they're sitting with their legs crossed, the foot is jigging. You know, there's just everything is ramped up all the time.
Yeah.
And it is good to make effort. We want to be motivated and get things done. But we also need to be able to switch back from that and to clear the mind and to be at ease. If we're efforting and pushing the thyroid all the time, we're not at ease. the last thing we want to do is sit still and go within, which is what will
The
help
very
to,
person who need it. Yeah, it'll be the last thing they'll want to do.
yeah, it'll
Yeah.
help to balance the thyroid. And in a way, people will say, well, what do I do? The
Yeah.
thyroid always wants to know what to do. And saying, do nothing, be still, be at ease. It's nearly easier to do something like breath work that brings you into the relaxed state of mind, brings you into the present moment. There's particular yoga postures that you can do. The shoulder stand is a good one. Even a seated cat-cow, just very gently mobilizing the neck to adjust the pressures on the physical gland. The fish pose, the plow, there's various ones in yoga that are used.
Basically kind of things that mobilize and move the neck either into extension in that kind of like the fish pose,
Yeah.
or the into flexion in like a shoulder stand or the plow, that kind of position.
Yeah.
So you're kind of mobilizing the neck probably to either release local muscle tension that will oftentimes happen as a guarding kind of effect, or to increase blood flow, like a lot of the yoga poses we would talk about that, where they emphasize the flow of blood to a particular gland, but also to focus your energy into that area as well, that it should be twofold,
Yeah.
multifold, but just from those two perspectives.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might be the purpose of those exercises.
Yeah. And unfortunately, making effort and shouting the loudest seems to get the most attention. But the end result is that there's an agitation in the person all the time. They're always on edge. Somebody comes up behind them and they nearly
The high
jump
startle
out.
reaction. Yeah.
Yeah, and you think of that in relation to the parathyroids, which are controlling calcium levels. And calcium keeps us calm and relaxed and able to sleep really well and so on. So the constant push, the constant effort makes the thyroid work harder, makes us not store as much calcium. It's drawn from everywhere to keep the blood levels right. So it can be taken from the nerve endings, from the teeth. We'll see the acid spots or the little white spots in the nails. They get very fragile and bendy and so on. So there's things that we can do to help balance the thyroid, the physical gland. Something we can take is iodine. They reckon a lot of people are depleted on iodine, and this can actually show up as an overactive thyroid or underactive. So from years of pushing yourself, the thyroid burns out and it flips, it goes the opposite way, it becomes underactive.
Right.
There isn't a gug left in it, it can't be pushed anymore.
Batteries are dead.
Yeah. And the person who's been wiry thin for years can suddenly put on a lot of weight and they haven't changed what they're eating. They may not have changed the exercise they're doing, but it's just that the thyroid is clocked out. It's exhausted.
Now, did you want to look at the physical gland? I'm always inclined to use some anatomy for reference. I think maybe not everybody would be familiar with these. So if we look at our good old 3D for medical, and if we zoom in here, we can see the airway here, kind of the trachea, but then the thyroid really does wrap around it. It's just below the cartilage here.
Yes.
So that gland is almost like butterfly shaped. It's straddling the windpipe, and then embedded within it, we would have the parathyroids.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think we can see parathyroids on this. Let's just see if we hide that. No, it doesn't actually show
Yeah, they're kind
parathyroids.
of embedded in the gland.
These are smaller glands within the thyroid.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to see how it would affect things like how we'd oftentimes say you'll hear it in somebody's voice when they're under pressure.
Yeah.
You hear the strain. You talked about like kind of the recurring throat infections and things like that, like basically problems in this area where it's straddling the windpipe.
Yeah.
It's quite easy to visualize how that might occur.
Yeah, the thyroid, it can affect the voice. And the thyroid, when it's under pressure, you'll hear that kind of strain, or the voice is a little bit strangled. It's nearly like even speaking is done through effort. It's hard to push the voice out.
Yeah.
You know, that it's really...
And sometimes we'll even hear this in ourselves.
Yeah.
I notice it in myself at times when you are under more pressure, you can hear it in your voice, and you sometimes it will feel like nearly a scratchiness in the throat, and sometimes it just feels like your voice is a bit harsh, we notice this sometimes when you're in a public setting and you can hear these voices that we'd say, it sounds almost like a jackhammer in your head. It's peck, peck, peck. It goes through you. There's a hard to define. It's not just about volume. There's a hardness to the voice.
Yeah.
And I think this comes back to what you were saying, that it's not always the action that we're looking at. It is what is causing the action. Where is it coming from? And I think that's the big thing, that it's not like it's bad to be driven or to make effort at times, but is it coming from insecurity?
Yeah.
And when it comes from insecurity, that is the imbalance. That is the dysfunction that is going to upset the function of the physical gland, the thyroid, and also the energy center, the associated chakra.
Yeah.
That the place you're coming from influences a lot of what you do. Yeah. So if you go within, you're coming from a place of inner peace, inner solidness, you're not expressing insecurity, then you'll choose to be driven in a particular area or task, but in a way that is healthy, useful, and not damaging. I think of the examples, I won't name the particular athlete, but there's one particular athlete in the US that's quite famous for this, where they push themselves to a punishing degree and is known to have a lot of joint issues, totally cartilage gone in their knees, stuff like that. And they're all about push, push, push and drive. And while they might have achieved exceptional feats of human endurance, it's at a massive cost that you're so insecure, you're going to push yourself to the point that you're doing serious damage. Whereas if instead you were coming from a point of, balance within yourself, not being driven by insecurity, not being chased by your personal demons, I think in his case he would say that you can achieve, but not to the point of damage.
Yeah. I think the alignment in this center comes when the heart is open. That when you have balance in the heart center and the associated gland, the thymus, that compassion and kindness is the motivation that's being expressed through our voice, through our words, through our actions. That really lights up these main 7 chakras, that you feel them coming online when it's heart-centered.
Yeah. And it's like the old expression, if you're going to say something, is it truthful? Is it helpful? Is it kind?
Yeah.
That it is done through compassion.
Yeah.
I always thought it was very interesting when you look at the physiology, because I try to connect what seem like very abstract concepts into physical, measurable reality that we can validate. And they would talk about how the thyroid, we said, controls metabolism. But when the thyroid is overactive, one of the things it can do is secrete a substance that actually melts the thymus for additional blood sugar, additional energy, which should be like a last-ditch survival thing, but people just do it as a extreme stress response.
Yeah.
And you're going, when you think in terms of the associated chakras, and you'd say willpower and compassion, that when the will is overly dominant, it is at the expense of the compassion. It's literally melting the thymus.
Yeah.
Which is going to have an impact on your immune response. And I think this is why a lot of people will push themselves enormously, and then when they crash, they'll oftentimes get sick. They'll be unwell.
Yeah.
Because their immune system is diminished, that it's functioning because their thymus has been largely under attack from the thyroid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when people push their thyroid excessively, they lack that compassion. They get quite insensitive to others, and they kind of trample all over everybody and are oblivious to it. They're so focused and driven on their goals to cover whatever insecurity that they're blind to their impact on others. So I think bringing it into the compassion and the kindness, the heart center, and then the energy or drive coming to the thyroid from that place, it completely changes how you show up in the world.
Well, when you think about it, the difference of being driven by compassion, if the heart is open first and then the thyroid is balanced, it's harmonized with that,
And expressing.
then you can be driving, but driving from compassion rather than driving from insecurity, which will really lack compassion. Like you said, that people will be more inclined to push others down in order to elevate themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And as I said, in the short term, it seems like the person shouting the loudest and pushing themselves forward gets all the attention. They're so agitated and ill at ease in themselves, they can't enjoy it when they get there.
think people see this in the workplace, you know, that somebody might be pushing themselves forward and get into a management position and they terrorize the people beneath them. And it's not a harmonious environment. And everybody loves it when the more rounded, compassionate, balanced person gets forward and the workplace thrives because they're working together rather than
Being
pushing
dominated.
and pulling and dominating and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we mentioned some of the things that would physically help balance the thyroid, the postures, breath work, humming, singing, even speaking out loud. That uses the voice and the energy in the area. The particular sound, ham.
Okay, so most people will be familiar with it. We've talked about this on other episodes, like the type thing for
Yes.
meditation. So the way that vibrates a
Yes.
particular pitch
Yeah.
affects the thyroid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Finding the resonance, the part that makes it feel like it's vibrating the most. So you can go up and down the scale using it, ham. Other things you can take are things like iodine. And iodine is quite useful even if the thyroid is overactive or underactive. So there's a particular brand called Lugol's iodine, and it.
No financial affiliation or connection. This is just something that we found to be good.
Yeah, I remember our father Don Going talking about this years ago.
Yeah.
Lugol's iodine. I mean, it's around decades.
Oh, it's Lou Gold.
Yeah,
Lou Gold's
iodine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the guy's name.
And the recommended way to take it was kind of 1 to 3 drops in water. So it comes with a little dropper.
Oh yeah.
And you drink that first thing in the morning, and probably want to take for maybe around 4 to 6 weeks for the thyroid to gradually absorb enough iodine so that it can come back into balance and function correctly.
It's interesting because they do recommend like iodine tablets and things for different types of toxicity, like radiation poisoning, I'm thinking of in particular.
Okay.
They talk about using iodine. So presumably it's good for other things as well, like heavy metals, I think, as well, to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I guess that ties into if iodine is basically food for the thyroid and the thyroid is influencing metabolic rate, then it's the rate at which you'll metabolize or detoxify and get rid of these things.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And they say it'll also clear any upper intestinal bacterial growth. So it tends to kill if there's an overgrowth of fungus or bacteria, recurring infections, sore throats, glands constantly being up. The iodine seems to be a really good way of tackling that.
Excellent.
Yeah. So they're the main things that I wanted to look at in relation to the thyroid. And as I said, just not being afraid to speak our truth, but that the truth is coming from the connection within. And it's nearly like all these separate energy centers are light, and we want these to light up together and nearly illuminate so that there's a glow from us where we have that connection, that harmony, that ease, and all of these centers working together in balance.
I always find that fascinating when so many different elements really line up. You see the commonality between the psychological aspect of this, the physiological aspect, the spiritual aspect, you could say, that we can see the same theme running through each of those. You know, get in balance, get moving, get some exercise, reduce your stress, all the kind of lifestyle stuff that we've talked about for decades.
Yeah.
Interesting. Good. Anything else then before we move on?
No, I think that pretty much wraps it up.
Okay. So I suppose the other thing that I was going to talk about was our ongoing series that we're working on at the moment, Living Anatomy. I always think that's a really interesting thing because it's what is applicable to the living body, which is quite different to the way most people study anatomy. It's either textbooks or cadavers. There's no real life in it. I think we always come from the perspective of real world clinical experience, working with thousands of clients in clinic over the years, seeing the impact of treatment on students, all that kind of stuff. So living anatomy, I think, really is the label that suits us very well, that it is the study of the living, functioning body and how to positively influence that. So in that series, we've shot 3 episodes now, and we've talked a little bit about the first one was bunions. The other 2 we've shot were groin strain, which we talked about in our last episode. So you can always go back and watch that. And then the most recent one, which I think we'll actually release as episode 2, because it's quite an interesting one, is on anterior tibialis. Now, anterior tibialis is reasonably well known for people who've studied bodywork, but I think amongst the public, it's not that well known. And it gets its name from the fact that anterior just means to the front, and then tibialis because it's running along the bigger bone in the lower leg, the tibia. So again, the shin, what most people think of as their shin bone. And it's a really important one because it's a foot mover. And its action is not in day-to-day movements when we're walking particularly, but you could say running, jogging, any of those things. But during gait, it actually doesn't do what is commonly described as its action. So its action is when it shortens. It's a dorsiflexor and everter. So it means it pulls your toes up towards your head and it turns out the little toe side, or sorry, turns in the big toe side. It's a dorsiflexor and inverter.
Yeah.
So in gait, it's actually doing the opposite. It's lengthening against resistance, what we call eccentric movement. So when we heel strike, you actually roll down the outside of the foot and then across to the big toe side to toe off. And we show this a little bit in one of our videos. So maybe we'll just take a quick look because we always release the anatomy part as like a trailer for each of these episodes. And then we'll have the full episode. So let me just see if we can forward this. So we're talking about the eccentric lengthening that occurs. I'm just going to forward this a little bit. So here I'm illustrating with like a TheraBand to show where anterior tibialis will be. And we put the model down on the table and you can see as the heel strikes, it is controlling the foot fall and particularly then the roll over onto the big toe. We'll see this from a front view. So when it comes down, it rolls through. So we then go on, we show a lot of different things. We get into some augmented reality. Oh, that bit was quite interesting as well. You'll oftentimes see this. I've noticed this a lot in teenagers in particular for some reason, that when they're standing, it looks like their foot has a flat tire. They're rolled really in. They'll tend to have a low arch, but you'll see this, the calcaneum, the heel bone here is kind of tilted outwards. Now, like I said, in this, we'll be releasing this trailer shortly. We'll be looking at things like augmented reality, the compartments. We'll be comparing anterior tibialis to its antagonistic muscle, posterior tibialis. So there's a good bit in that. Again, it's all contained in the main episode, but that's going to be quite a useful one to demonstrate the anatomy. But what I wanted to talk about, you'll notice this. You look at any foot and you'll see where the contact surface is. The skin is thicker, it's usually darker. And the bit that doesn't really come into contact with the ground, the skin is lighter and softer, like in the arch. And that shows us that when we heel strike, we go down the outside of the foot where the thicker skin is, and then across the base of the toes and onto the big toe. Now, if anterior tibialis has its typical pattern of dysfunction, it's typically weak and inhibited. So it doesn't really do that deceleration properly. We roll too far, too fast over towards the big toe side. And that's referred to as hyperpronation. And what that does is it causes a squashing, a collapsing down of the arch with each step. And you think about the issues that people will have with their arches. And then we get things like ascending syndromes. When this muscle is not working properly, the foot mechanics are disrupted. It starts to influence what's happening at the ankle, the knee, and sometimes even into the pelvis or the low back. So people can have this dysfunction, not really feel it other than maybe the occasional bout of shin splints, and they get that kind of burn down the front of the shin, but they will get a knock-on effect and the symptoms may appear in the knee. They may have things like meniscus trouble. They may have cricking or crunching, just poor alignment in the knee. They may have pain in their kneecap. They might have pain when they kneel down. All of these things will be added to or made worse if the foot mechanics are not right. And that really comes down to the balance between posterior tibialis and anterior tibialis. So in that episode, we'll actually look at, as I said, an anatomy review. You'll see all that in detail. But then we always go into self-treatment. So how you as an individual can work on yourself to normalize the texture and the tone in that muscle, and then restore balance between the posterior tibialis and the anterior tibialis. And I think always the useful, interesting part, how to maintain that, we do a bit of home care at the end. So always looking for stretches for the tight muscle, which is posterior tibialis in this particular dynamic, and then strength training movements for the anterior tibialis, the weak muscle. And then we do a little bonus as well. We do a staged difficulty level of a ankle stability drill, which is helping to coordinate between all four muscles that are kind of providing that stability, what we call the ankle stirrup system. I think we might have talked about this before. We have the two tibialis muscles on the inside of the arch, and then there's two running down the outside of the leg over the little bone, the fibula, and they're called the fibularis muscles. Because there's a long one and a short one, they're fibularis longus and fibularis brevis. And what I find fascinating is people who don't know anatomy, names like that where they have multiple syllables, they can seem like it's a completely different language. And it kind of is because it's Latin or Germanic in some cases. But when you understand what it's referencing, it's actually telling you a lot about the muscle. So like we said, anterior tibialis means the muscle by the tibia at the front. These fibularis muscles, there's a long one and a short one. So it's fibularis, sitting over the fibula, longus, distinguishing the long one, fibularis brevis. There is a tertius as well, but we're not too worried. It's not part of that stirrup system. So the balance between these can be really improved with this simple ankle stability drill. But as you go up through the levels of difficulty, you're also improving your awareness, your brain's focus on the other inputs that affect balance. So really important for sports people, but also as we age, a lot of people will experience difficulties with balance. So if we do some early training, we can help offset an awful lot of that.
Yeah.
That we can maintain good stability, good brain awareness of the feedback that we're getting through our muscles, tendons and ligaments, and we can actually maintain in good health into quite advanced years. And I always think of this, my favorite old adage, that old chestnut of a stitch in time saves 9. That if we do the early intervention, the simple stuff early on, we don't develop into more significant issues later in life. It's doing those little things on a regular basis is the stitch in time.
Yeah.
So that was a brief overview of what we're going to be doing in our living anatomy. Was there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think just back to the thyroid briefly, it doesn't have to be all serious and heavy. Like they say, even playing charades or something, you know, anything that gets
Creative, you're saying? Speaking?
Creative, expressing yourself. And as I said, some people even say journaling. And just one question is, you know, how good a listener are you? If you're all thyroid, all push, it's nearly like you don't even hear other people's needs. So just coming back to have fun with it, not effort so much, and find that stillness.
Yeah, excellent. Nice simple things that people can do, they can implement to create positive change quite quickly, quite easily. And I always think that meditation is a great way of opening up those energy centers, becoming more aware of that energy within you. And if people were to do those, they would feel quite significant improvement quite quickly. And it doesn't have to be for the people who maybe the thyroid is a little bit overactive. It doesn't have to be meditation in the traditional sense of sitting still, cross-legged or lying down or whatever it might be. Movement meditation. Do some action that brings your attention into the present moment. I always like the kind of the simple moving the arms, almost like a very basic Tai Chi type movement. But it gives those people who feel they need to be moving something to do, but it is still an active meditation. Another thing I find really useful is the very short bursts. Long meditation sessions are great, but even a simple thing when people are on their phones, when an ad comes on, just close the eyes for a second, just take a moment to just breathe and relax. Instead of getting frustrated with the ads, tune it out. Relax. Feel that connection deep within yourself, that inner self. Take a moment and then go back to what you're doing. Because that can be like a couple of seconds, but several times in the day. That you're just stepping outside of the normal swirls and stresses and demands, relaxing for a moment, and then you can go back to it. It's almost like we said, you know, stress is not necessarily bad. It's not having a chance to recover. The rest, the recuperation in between. When stress is ongoing and we don't get a chance to recuperate, that's when it becomes damaging. So taking those couple of seconds, stepping out, a little bit of rest, go back to what you're doing. Step out every so often, rest, recuperate, center yourself. And the more you do that, the easier it becomes. Yeah.
Absolutely. It becomes a habit.
Yeah. So nice simple steps. Hopefully you guys will implement those and really feel the benefits. Anything else?
No, I think that's all for this episode.
Okay, so thanks for joining us, folks. We'll have another episode out shortly, so be sure to stay tuned. Always, we would say, do let us know what you'd like to hear us discuss as well, because we are very responsive to what people are discussing, what they're interested in, what we see in different places, comments and different podcasts and stuff like that. So by all means, let us know if there's a particular topic you'd like to see us discuss in future.
Yeah, comment, like and share.
Thanks very much. Until next time, folks, We will see you again shortly.